Okay, I apologize for the late start here. The clock on the wall is a little bit running behind. Good afternoon and welcome to the Recreational Facilities Advisory Board meeting for August 26, 2019. We are being live streamed, so I'd ask everybody to turn your cell phones to vibrate mode, please, and thank you. We'll start with the disclosure of pecuniary interest. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? If none, state no pecuniary interest declared, starting with Ryan.
No.
No. Okay. Well, it's been a productive 3 weeks, I think, in terms of moving forward. We're going to have some good remarks from Amy in a few minutes. And we got some great stuff from Gord talking to a construction firm, just outlining kind of giving us the ballpark that our wish list is within the realm of the possible with some good design work. So not consulting with the firm, but looking at their past projects. So that's great news. Does anybody have anything they'd like to start with before we press right on in? Any changes to the agenda? Very good. Okay, let's start with the AMO update from Amy.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mayor Chop and I attended the AMO conference in Ottawa, as you know, and it was outstanding. It was really, really great. I think great for Norfolk County in general, but especially great for the hub concept. We had 3 meetings in total with the Ministry of Infrastructure staff. Unrelated, 2 were unrelated to the hub, but I think it's important because we were able to create a bit of dialogue with them and build a relationship with the staff and share details about more than just the hub, some information about what's going on in Norfolk County and why the hub is critical to us right now. So our presentation went very well, and it came just hours after the Premier had announced about the additional funding stream for community culture and recreation. So we made an announcement about $1 billion for the province to share with municipalities, and then we headed just hours later in to meet with staff. We gave the full presentation, which I have a copy that you guys can look at. That we presented on. The speaking notes aren't there, but we had some stock images in there of Norfolk County, and we pulled them out and put real images of real people and real projects and Fanshawe College students, and really just drove home the culture and the change that's happening in our community. And they said they could feel the energy coming off of our presentation. There was really great dialogue about partnerships and great feedback about what should be included and what we could anticipate to see in the application. They also informed us that the green funding envelope is expected to roll out soon, so our municipality will be eligible to put in 1 application per stream, so we can hit up both of those funding streams. Since the conference happened, actually Councillor Van Passen was also there, and he's notorious for his hallway meetings where he just stands in the hallways with a cup of coffee and lurks and finds ministers. So he held the Laurie Scott, Minister of Infrastructure's bag as they walked to a meeting, and he plugged the hub directly with her, as we only met with her staff, which was fairly helpful. But since then, I've been connected with Eva Salter, who is the regional advisor for the Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Sport, as well as Ministry of Seniors and Accessibility. And she's emailed all of the funding details to us that basically outlines what we need to include, what makes us eligible, what makes us ineligible, and the actual application for reference only. So that has been shared with our staff already. The funding stream opens on September the 3rd, but that doesn't mean that we have to wait until the 3rd to get started on that. So that's exciting. Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, it's the ICIP program on the federal level, also announced that they still have $11.8 billion federal dollars to cost share on projects, and that runs directly into those 2 streams as well. The breakdown of funding is federal government 40%, the province at 33.33%, and the municipality at 26.67%, with the total project cap of $50 million total. So I think that's a conversation that we can have as a group with how we move forward on that, but I think that we can still set our sights high and plan for the structure that we always have been planning for and make adjustments to our fundraising. I'm not quite sure how that looks on the application per se, but we'll tap into staff for that. Some other really helpful details that came out of our meeting, like I said, we spoke about partnerships, and we were strongly advised, as it states in the application, to leverage partnerships in the community, specifically with, the wording is, focus on vulnerable populations and Indigenous people. So I think that as a group, we should sit down and streamline some conversation into how we want to network with First Nations community, looking for a letter of support and endorsement. I think that we have a very large Mennonite community here in Norfolk County that we could look at partnerships with them as well. Maybe there's something to be said with partnerships through Norfolk General Hospital and obviously Fanshawe College, and identify some gaps, some servicing gaps, and how we can bring that all together. So whether we look at a full-blown partnership with them or not, it still would be favorable to have letters of endorsement from each and every one of those. And finally, the submissions are due November 12th. So September 3rd until November 12th to get it in full. The estimated date to see if our project would be nominated to the federal level, we would be notified in the summer of 2020 with a final funding decision in the fall or winter of that same year. So in about a year's time from now, we'll really know where we sit. So that is the full update on the funding and the AMO conference. I'm not sure. That's a good question. I think if the community partnership is already there and easily identified, that we can have staff reach out and secure. But I think if maybe we need to do some more advocating and build more relationships in that way, then maybe that's something for RFAB to dig a little deeper on.
Okay, we'll start pursuing those letters of endorsement. I think at the very least we can start reaching out to those places. JJ's affiliated with the hospital. We've got other avenues to reach out. So we'll start talking as board members to the various groups, and then we can start kind of figuring out the best way to get those letters of endorsement into the council. In terms of the funding envelope, if we're not going to know until fall 2020, it's my assumption that council will still want us to pursue getting a project manager together and continuing to pursue as if there is no drop-dead funding deadline that we're looking at.
I would agree, and I would advocate for that as well. Yeah, okay. Keep moving.
Okay, good. The $50 million total, was that based on recreational facilities, or was that inclusive of the entire project?
Entire project.
Okay. Did you happen to discuss whether our land acquisition would be part of that, or was that going to be exclusive of that?
That is separate. Eligibility includes that you have to have ownership and capital skin in the game, so that's separate from that.
Okay, so that means our bit could be 26.67% plus the acquisition of the land and the servicing and that kind of thing. That's good. That's good.
Correct, yep.
Okay, that's great news, thanks. Okay, any final parting questions on AMO? JJ?
Yeah, I just wonder what the availability of funds would look like from the Green Fund. Any word on that?
No, pretty vague. It wasn't announced officially at the conference that the green stream was next, but we were told by ministry staff that we could expect it to come.
Okay. Before we move on to the next discussion item, I was remiss in my opening remarks duties. I should announce that our new CAO, Mr. Chris McQueen, is here. And thank you for a nice, simple to pronounce name. I butchered the last one. But thanks for coming and welcome. All right, we'll move on to project timelines. Ian, can you just kind of update us the state of where we're at and where we're going next?
Well, I can tell you where we are and hopefully where we're going. Just looking at the timelines on the roadmap that we established 6 months ago, we're nearing the end of the third quarter, and we're pretty well on bang with the all of the activities that we were to accomplish during that up to that point in time, including obviously the property, which is getting hopefully very close. After that, we get into, and this again is in the third to the fourth quarter. And again, it's helpful that Councillor Martin's comments about the various dates there, that we can now be more specific in our projections and the timeframes we have left here. The updates on the preliminary cost estimates, I mean, you got a budget coming up, and we talk about that each time we get into this roadmap business. We have to move and get a more definitive cost estimate on the scope of the work that is before us. That's likely pretty critical. It doesn't have to be detailed design. The hiring a project manager, we've already talked about to some extent. And the other big item that's coming forward now, given that we won't know until sometime next year whether or not we've even been approved, I personally think that, Council should give serious consideration to investing money in moving ahead with some of this advanced work in the design aspect, because that will give you a more definitive cost estimate, and if you have to modify your scope of project, you know what you got to contend with. And doing that, we've talked about this previously, we got to proceed and understand what method of how we want to approach this in terms of design build or design bid and then tender construction. But I think with the information that Councillor Martin's brought back, that we can still accomplish some parts of that, certainly within the next few quarters going into 2020. And that's really all I would have to say at this particular point in time, because there's a lot of gaps beyond that once you get into construction, because we haven't really dealt with that at all. We've just left the extension on there. And again, we're talking anywhere between 2023 and 2024 to complete everything, if everything falls in place. I haven't taken into account the fall of 2020 right now for final approval, but again, if we can jump ahead and move ahead with some of that preliminary design work and get a handle on costs and so forth, that would be very helpful.
Well, I also think that we could probably start, once we do have our site acquired, we could probably start making sure the infrastructure is ready there, the water, sewer, and electrical servicing and all the other bits for whatever site we're at. That does not have to wait for the 2020 funding. If we're moving forward with this project, we might as well move forward as if we're going all the way forward. So that kind of stuff. Plus, moving forward on the design build or design bid process, we should be able to continue to press forward on. And that way, when we do get the money, we've got the package right there and ready to go. Ryan, you have an opinion on that? Yeah, it's good? Yeah, Sue? Amy?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So given that council is operating on a new schedule now, we meet on the first 3 Tuesdays of the month, and we're off on the remaining Tuesdays of the month, and that staff will begin digging into this file, this application. Should there be a particular recommendation coming out of RFAB today discussing these next steps that we'd like to send to council, because we're essentially 3 weeks out from it coming to a council meeting. And then we would meet again. And so if we don't make one today, essentially our recommendation wouldn't come forward till late October, and this
Right.
is due in November.
Right.
So is there some type of recommendation that we'd like to put forward specifically around the next steps moving forward, putting a cost estimate together? Or it might be too premature for Mr. Cridlin to chime in yet. I don't know if he's even had time to read it in full. But is there something in particular that you need from us?
Through the chair to the board member, I agree. We've got to act quick, and I don't think we want to miss the next council meeting. So if there is anything formulating here, I mean, as far as the servicing of the property, till we have the property, it's maybe premature, but that's something that council can always bring into a meeting. Let's get that servicing done, whether it's through the public works budget or addition. But no, I think the group really, the committee needs to give a lot of thought of what they want to see and how we need for it. We do need that direction. I'm afraid so. Or not afraid, but I think we do need. I agree. Bad terminology here. Been a long day. Sorry about that, Councillor Martin.
Well, we'll get to that in a second when we drop down to the requirements working group. But we'll try and come out with a couple of clear recommendations from this meeting for the council to act on. Anything else from the project timelines? Ian, would you mind updating the project timeline to reflect these 2 dates, 3 September for the financing opening and 12 November for it to close? And just make sure it's on our timeline so that we're well aware of it. 3 September to 12 November. That's when the provincial funding envelope was opening. I'm not concerned about that because we weren't going to need the money until 2020 anyway. What we really need to do is make sure that we give council clear advice on, what we need to do to properly hit the execute button as soon as that funding does hit. So, I think with this funding envelope time frame here, we're still moving along according to your time frame. We just need to start figuring out exactly when we have to get council to get that project manager position going. And I think, if not today, we need to try and come up with a decision between now and the next meeting on to whether we're going to be recommending that design bid or design build concept.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I think rather than try to project it at this meeting, we need to give it some thought in terms of the new timeframes that Councilor Martin has provided to us and how everything will fit together. And as she said, you know, it would be nice to have some sort of a recommendation for council as soon as possible. And whether we get that at this meeting, I don't know. Hopefully we can. But coming up with something more definitive in terms of those other timeframes, I'd say we need a little more time to work on that.
Okay, Amy?
They're going to hate me, and I don't think we have more time because October 5th, so if we set recommendations at the next RFAB meeting, they'll come to council on October 15th. If we need to go out to tender to find someone for a cost estimate, that without giving consideration to that, that only gives Bill 4 weeks to plug in the information. So is there some direction you can set us off to that maybe staff can start to investigate and then council can firm up?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to Councilor Martin, what detail, if any, did the VG, or plus VG, is that their, did they give any preliminary cost estimates for the various components that we have already considered? Okay.
No, plus VG was just used to give us some visuals to send us off in the presentation.
Yeah. Again, Mr. Chairman, I'm thinking in terms of the application, what you're going to put in that application. Because the application, from my previous knowledge of those things, was pretty detailed to some extent. And we're not going to have any definitive price, but if the ceiling is 50 million, you know, we're going to likely
I
more than that.
I think our budget is probably between 49,990 and 50.
Yeah, right.
Based on our wish list, I think we're pretty much at the peak there. But you know, I think if it comes down to it and we need a little time to study this issue, we'll just call a supernumerary meeting for 2 weeks from now or 3 weeks. You know, immediately prior to the meeting, whatever works for everybody's schedule, and then we'll try and come up with those key decisions that we need to do to pass on to council.
Mr. Chairman, I agree. If just giving us 2 weeks, or from my perspective anyway,
Yeah.
that would be great if we could, and we'll still meet the time frame to get to council.
Okay, well, that's good to know. All right, we'll try and throw that on your timeline, Ian. September 12th, we're going to have to try and give some advice to council on which way to move forward on this. Yep. So we'll try and hold a supernumerary meeting to come up with those decisions and fill in the blanks for the application form, whatever we can. JJ.
Yeah, I agree. If it's necessary to have a meeting on September the 12th and get some of that, you know, information in order. But can we make a list today of what it is that we need to think about and look at so that when we come together before that date or on that date that we have, you know, formed in our minds a pretty good idea of what it is we need to put down in terms of recommendation to council. And as far as timelines go, I hear the, you know, 2023, 24. If we have all of our ducks in order ahead of time, can we not see, you know, or envision a shovel in the ground in 2021 if funding announcement is, you know, in our favor in 2020? If, you know, if we indeed look to hire somebody as a project manager, if we indeed make part of our recommendation to council that we go forward and you know, put an RFP out to get a cost consultant in place, somebody that can, help us fine tune the requirements. And well, we're speaking of requirements because it always seems to happen that we talk about requirements before we get to it on the agenda. We do have a very preliminary chart that's coming together of the various requirements that we, talking to community groups, what they see as needs for this type of facility. And it's starting to really form up a pretty good idea of square footage or area requirements for each one of those different components. And from that, I think we can also put together a very good preliminary cost estimate, so that can be used in the application process as well. I'll just put that out there, but I think that out of this meeting we should come up with a list of things that we need to consider for this next meeting, so that it can get to council in time for their approval in September.
Okay. I think maybe we roll that to the end so that we have a little more time to think about that particular list and discuss it. I guess we're going to need a motion to change the agenda a bit to review that, or are we good? Okay, we're good. All right. Very good. All right, so we'll consider that, and at the end of this meeting, we'll try and come up with that list that we're going to consider for the next meeting. Is there anything else we need to discuss on the project timeline at this time? We will get to the requirements shortly, but no? Okay. We'll move on to the communications working group update with Sue.
Thank you. I met with Matt Terry, our communication officer of Norfolk County, and I just wanted to update that all the bios are updated. We're just cleaning up some of the bullet points under the RFAB on the website. That was one thing, and we're just looking at putting a banner so it directs people to that website to see updates. The other thing that we did come up with an idea is to build some more community engagement through creating personal stories, hitting up community user groups, people in particular, and asking them the similar question, and the question being is how will the All Norfolk Community Hub enhance their lifestyle? And if we could, as a team together, because we want to reach multi-generational community members, if we could work together to grab a picture of that person, and we want to do it in 100 words or less, and then that way we can generate enthusiasm for this project. So we're going to create a picture, get their name, make sure their age group, different age groups, and their reasons why this would enhance their lifestyle. And that would be something that we would be ongoing and updating, especially when we get the land acquisition, we can really start to push that out. And that is it from communications. Any questions?
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, JJ, requirements. What do you got for us?
Well, as I stated, we're starting to really get a lot of information coming together here. We've had folks from our last meeting, we kind of divvied up the work around looking at ice services, hockey rinks, pools, people to talk to, seniors, and see what their specific requirements might be in a facility like this. Commercial kitchen, talked to Fanshawe, actually even had an audience with the Haldeman Norfolk Housing Authority because they had responded to our survey. And so there's a lot of different groups out there and some interesting partnerships that I think that there's opportunity to gain in a lot of fronts. If we start to include different groups, Councillor Martin talked about some of the applications and the emphasis on working with towards something that would fit with the vulnerable people, indigenous groups, the Mennonite community. I think that's a great one. we should approach those folks for sure. Big part of Norfolk out there. And so that is all coming together in the form of a chart that I'm working on. And so some of the requirements, all the requirements that we had previously listed are in that chart. So there's square foot area that's starting to come together to, match up with each one of those requirements. And from that, I think it's be an interesting exercise to start to put together that preliminary dollar figure. And you can see some of the plans from different facilities come together on this sheet of paper in very rough draft form. And, it's starting to show what our square foot requirement might be for a facility such as this. And the budget numbers also starting to form up around that. So,
Yeah, I think we've got a pretty good rough order of magnitude estimate, but that source that Gord did provide was a 10-year-old drawing too. So
yeah,
if it's like the housing market, it's probably gone up about 25%. So
and we're starting to see some interesting things in terms of cost. Some of the newer facilities seem to cost less per square foot in construction than some of the older facilities. So
yeah.
that number kind of surprised me in some certain cases. But I would say within the next week or two, we'll have that chart sort of firmed up. I'll be able to put it out to everybody, as well as, a fuller requirements listing from that document that we had already started previously. And, so each one of the RFAB members will be able to look at that. And, they'll start to see what the requirements mean in terms of square foot area and cost.
Well, in worst case, if we're capped by 50 mil with this project right now, then that's phase one, capped at 50 mil. And then we start looking at what's phase two, and how many minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, or years do we have in between phases.
Yeah.
So I don't think we're unnecessarily constrained or hamstrung by anything at this point.
No,
Looks
and
very
I think
positive.
the $50 million cap wouldn't include some of the partners that could come into a project like this with their own particular form of funding. And also, we mentioned the green funding that will become available soon. So I think that the $50 million cap might be able to move in terms of, bringing on other partners to a project like this, and them bringing their own form of funding to it.
Well, that's the keyword funding is great. Unless there's any more questions for JJ, we can move on to Gord's fundraising. Okay, Gord. AMO implications first. Based on what you have just absorbed from Amy, what's that going to do for us?
Well, really, this is job number one right now. And answering these questions, just as a brief glance at this, there's no surprises in my mind. They're looking at details with regards to the different components which would come out of the requirements and the costs eligible and ineligible costs of each. I think that staff would be able to provide some guidance into what's going to fall in each category, professional fees as well, land acquisition. JJ just finished the discussion around a week or two and really firming that up. And I think if we can give some direction and working with staff that way to fill this up, this is the first order of business. And then the fundraising group can meet further with regards to next steps in terms of the broader community outreach. But I think this is where we're at in terms of fundraising.
Okay. It was suggested to me to discuss this, the financial offsets from the disposal or repurpose of the existing facilities. How do we go about doing that? Amy.
That's such a valid point, because I think when we look to the community to support this, we need to have an answer to every arguable question possible, and that's going to be a big one. How do we expect the taxpayers to pitch into this new facility when we're still carrying other facilities? So I think that it's to start with. I think that we need to very clearly articulate to the community that we're looking to repurpose or sell off the existing infrastructure that we have. We're not maintaining all of the above, and we're looking to, operate more efficient, new. So I think that's first and foremost. Let's get the word out there that if there's a creative project, if there's something that we can do to better our downtown community, creative housing solutions, that we're looking at repurposing what we have or selling it off. And hopefully we can maybe get creative through staff with some tours of the existing infrastructure that we have. Let's have some open houses and tour the public through them, and with the intent that we're open to suggestions and we're looking to offset some of those costs.
Right, that's very valid, and of course, we have talked about the $10 million over the next 10 years or so infrastructure cost just to maintain these existing facilities. So that O&M has been factored in somewhat already, but we haven't actually talked about the cost of disposal and or the benefits of disposal, I should say, and how that's going to help offset the cost of the new facility as well. Bill, do you have anything to add there?
Through the chair, I was just going to comment. I'm not sure if it was this group or before this council got in, but we do have demo costing on the buildings and things like that. So it's not a big part of it, but I think it is, because then people will know if it's a developer that comes in, or does the county, in turn, depending what facilities we get rid of, demo these, and whether we absorb that cost and then it's open land for somebody, or whether it's better to sell it as, and at least the eyes wide open, they go and they have an idea of what the demos would cost. So just adding that in, we have that working calculation done. So
Okay, very good. So that takes us about halfway through the question then, and then we have to turn it into an asset and say, if we can sell the senior center, are we going to get $1 billion for it, or maybe $1 million, or maybe, yeah. So, if we can find a way to figure out what the assets are going to be worth on disposal, I think that would be beneficial for numbers guys anyway. Help offset and then sell the message through Sue. Gord?
And just similar to Bill's comments on the demolition costs, I'm sure we can reach out to some experts with regards to those that deal with commercial property to give some advice on values and potential purposes for these properties, because they're in the business.
Right.
So I know there have been some ideas with regards to repurposing them for recreational type activities, et cetera, and those are valid, but the benchmark might be what is the value on the open market, either demolished or otherwise.
Right.
And I just think reaching out to experts in that area might be the first step.
Okay. So we'll throw that down as something to discuss here as for our next meeting as well. All right. I guess the next thing I wrote down on your behalf. Oh, I'm sorry, Amy, go ahead.
Okay, no problem. I have lots of questions this meeting. If we could just backtrack to that, I wonder if maybe we could put a list of names together and share that immediately with staff, and then I would be more than happy to try and facilitate a roundtable and get that done sooner rather than later with a bunch of interested parties, and just maybe bring forward that information somehow to the next council meeting as well, and provide it to staff. I would be happy to do that. Maybe go as far as organizing a tour and bring that forward.
Through the chair, I'm just wondering if perhaps the existing fundraising committee, we already have a group of people there, can spearhead that and start that as part of our mandate, so we can get together and see what we can do in short order for putting ideas down for council.
Sure. Okay. I'll aim for that. Anything else before we move to the next topic for Gord? No? I can always revisit it if we need to. So the accurate costing of proposed facility. Any ideas how we're going to be getting a best estimate without having a project manager or even a decision made at this point?
I think probably knowing what we're building first would be helpful. I know JJ has put together some information, or has knowledge of anyway, with regards to efficient design and energy cost savings, et cetera, and staff might have some other indications of that. I think once we get a couple steps forward, we can probably start going down that path. It might be a bit premature in my mind to start looking at operational budgets before we know what we're operating. But open to ideas at the same time.
Okay. Ian?
I thought perhaps this was already available, because we did ask some of the places that we attended on site for their budget they use, or their cost estimates. Perhaps that is another source of getting a rough handle on pricing, including what JJ has been doing. If there has been recently completed ones, and I know your new CAO from, the Pelham project, he's very familiar with that, and it was high. So there's some other projects out there that you can get the cost estimates from. It's not going to be exact, but it's going to be likely a little more accurate than what we've got right now.
Right.
So that's one consideration. Whether or not you can get that quick enough, I don't know.
Bill, could we ask you to look at the facilities that we toured and see if we can get their cost estimates?
Through the chair, yes, we could. I thought it was the last meeting we did talk, maybe it was with Mr. Slang here, but there was a price per square foot, and then obviously the aquatics were more, but I think it came out between, I think we were using around 400 to 450, it's ballparking everything. Bigger pool actually would be more and more office space, but yeah, I can get a list of that together, but that's the number we came out with. I think it was around 450, but I'll fine tune it. I'll give you, I can give this group the facility, when it was built, and basically what the total cost was. So.
Yeah, I think it would be beneficial, rather than trying to break down by square foot, just so that we're talking apples to apples. If you say, for instance, the Laurier Y had a pool and 2 gyms and a weight facility and this much square footage, and then the cost of the facility, that level of detail should help us at least start breaking it down a little bit. If we could get a half a dozen selections like that, I think we'd be in good shape to come up with some at least rough order of magnitude estimates.
I think that's something staff can get fairly quickly.
Okay, very good. Something else it occurred to me, and I just wanted to make sure that we're always fiduciarily responsible here. A budget for the operating of the facility. If we have a staff of 200 people to maintain this, Norfolk County may not be able to afford it. But if we can come up with a rough idea of the staffing requirements of these locations, we might be able to at least cost out that the personnel cost and the O&M cost as well for the facility infrastructure itself.
That information is just actually right beside
You've
me
already
here.
got
Give
it
an
all?
idea.
Okay.
I didn't know if it would come up today, but we have pulled it together. So we have each facility, obviously the capital, the material supplies, heat, hydro sort of thing, plus staffing costs. So
That's our existing ones.
Existing ones,
Okay.
yeah. And then we have that, and compared to the new, I mean, I don't know if we can flush some of that out when we're looking at cost per build. I think in Norfolk's case, somebody like JJ would be able to look at the energy costs and probably say, well, you're going to be 30% cheaper. And again, as Gord had mentioned, until we know exactly what we're going to build, I think our staffing costs would probably be on par. Take whatever staff to move over to the new building, but I guess it depends on what we decide we're going to go with.
Okay. Do you have anything to add there? No? Anybody else? Okay. Well, that takes us to the next schedule on the agenda. So I guess for the supernumerary meeting, we have to make sure we come up with the list of questions that we want answers to for the next meeting. And I think I'll start us off. we have to fill in that application, so we really need to pass around those application questions and make sure we get those socialized out ASAP. And then I wish I'd have wrote more words here. I just wrote assets. Oh, that was the offsets. We could look into figuring out the cost of the offsets. Is that a priority, though, for the supernumerary meeting, or is that just something we want for the next major meeting? Something for the next major meeting. In terms of guiding council, what do we absolutely need to pass along before the next meeting? And Sue?
Question, are we going to define what we want into this facility now so that we can get going on this, or
I don't
not?
think the facility design needs to be hammered out. I think the broad strokes need to be hammered out, but as I alluded to, I think we're looking at the cap of this funding envelope right now anyway, with the list of on our wish list. So I really think we need to not worry so much about the detail within the facility as much as identify what those major items will be for the list on the application, but I don't think we need to specify the number of lanes in the pool or the temperature of the therapy pool or any of that stuff at this point. But I'm not entirely certain I'm on the right track with that. Ian?
Mr. Chairman, since we don't have a copy of the application in front of us, and to be honest with you, I am not that familiar with it, it would be very helpful if we had all of the components of the application available so that we could then judge it. Is there a chance that we get that information in the next couple of days?
Amy?
I can share the program guidelines and the for reference application in full with all of us. In my mind, when we talk about what this facility has, I think we already know, the community already knows, and staff already knows. Staff knows the size of a senior center that we need. We know that we're looking at not making mistakes and not building a facility that we look back and regret on. So I think we're leaning towards that 50-meter pool. We're looking at twin pad because that's replacement of what we have. We know that we want, the community wants a therapy pool. We know they want an indoor walking track. We know what's going in it. For me, the question is what goes into phase 1 and what goes into phase 2 so that there's no stone left unturned and this facility is all encompassing. And I would suggest that's how we break it down. We build a $50 million facility with our priorities in phase 1. My suggestion would be that we come back. I would almost like to suggest a special meeting before the 9th, maybe even if everyone's available. I'm looking at Friday, September the 6th or earlier in that week. That's the same week that the funding envelope opens. I don't think we want to wait more than 7 days before we bounce back to staff. And additionally, I might even like to throw this out to Mr. Cridland that he can take a look at everything in full when he finds time over the next few days, and he can come to that meeting or share details with us with what he needs from us. Let's let him lay eyes on it and then come forward and tell us what he needs to make this a go. And then that gives us time to put some solid recommendations forward, bring it to council at the very next meeting, and we're off and running. We don't lose much time that way.
That sounds fine with me. We'll take it offline to nail down the exact date on that meeting. Everybody will have to consult their calendars to make sure that we can develop a quorum for that. I was also thinking about the guidance that we need to meet Ian's timeline issues, and this is the third or fourth meeting in a row that we've brought up the option of design build or design bid, and we really need to nail down, okay, this is the route that we recommend you go, and these are the reasons why, and then council can take that, that advice, and we can make a decision on that and get this design. As soon as the requirements are done, we can get that design out there. But we need council to also, I think, fund that initial bid process. So we need to try and get advice to council on how much money are we going to spend bidding this out of the county's gold box. And I think we need to do that fairly quickly. And I think that's one of the things that we should be considering earlier than later. And along with that, you know, Ian will have the best advice on this, but when do we pick that project manager up and get them running with the finer details? Ian.
Well, as far as the project manager is concerned, my suggestion would be, at this point, if you have somebody, bring them in on contract, so, you know, we don't know where this project's going to go ultimately. But if you bring them in, somebody who's really familiar with this stuff, he's likely would be one of your prime assets to build on whatever we need to do in the next few months, or up till the end of the year or early into next year. And again, if you're under contract, knowing full well that it could be terminated depending on the circumstances. So from my perspective, I think that's one thing that you need. That individual may then be more inclined to be very forthright in terms of the pros and cons of going design build or design bid construction, more so than perhaps any of us here are. Because not, you know, those options or those methods don't always apply 100% to any given project, so
Right.
it varies. And the other thing before we leave today, if I could just interject right now, if I could just ask Councillor Martin, because I'm sitting here thinking, okay, well, let's change the time lines here. If you could just remind me anyway, in terms of what happens after November, there's 2 more dates in 2020 that you mentioned.
November 12th is the application closing date at 11:59 p.m. And then if the province picks us up and nominates us to the federal government, that information, we would find out that has happened in summer of 2020. It does say in the details that that's estimated. And then it follows up with a decision in the fall and winter. And I'm assuming that's a final
Fall 2020 and possibly the winter 2021.
estimated.
Yeah, and that is important because in terms of what JJ asked, he thought my timelines were a little too far down the road. You go back and look at it, and taking the information that Councillor Martin just gave us, final approval, the earliest, is going to be in the 4th quarter of 2020. That's what you're saying, if we're going to get money. And or could be into the winter or the 1st quarter of 2021. And I originally estimated this project was somewhere in the neighborhood of 18 to 24 months construction period. It's a big project, and I didn't just assume that. I talked to architectural firms that have been involved in this sort of thing, and that's what they gave. Now, if you project that forward, it is into close to 2023. I just wanted to put that in perspective. I'd rather be a little, I know from a public perspective it may not be that good to say it's going to be done in a year. In fact, we should maybe target for that. But you don't want to do it so fast that you start making mistakes along the way. But anyway, the point of my discussion right now is to get a handle on this so that I can give you an updated version of this chart in much more detail than we got based on today's information that is coming forth in the discussions.
But based
and
on
I
what
can have that ready certainly by the 6th if that's when we meet.
based on what you suggested there, it is not too early to pick up a contracted project manager. So I think that advice to council should also be forthcoming before the next meeting, so that that they clearly know that they need staff whose sole job it is going to be to help manage this particular project. And that will probably help guide us, like you said, on that design-build decision and other things, particularly with respect to how do we put together a master plan and then break it apart again so that we can get a phase one that falls into the right funding envelope. Ian.
Again, Mr. Chairman, I think you're right, and I think the fact that if everything goes according to Hoyle, the county will have invested a considerable amount of money into property acquisition shortly. Hopefully that goes ahead. So again, in terms of the cost of a project manager and these other things that we're talking about, that's very small in comparison. So otherwise, you've got a gap of a year or so where nothing happens. You either got to decide to proceed, and I think that's the feeling that's coming across in this meeting today with some of these things, and fill in the void between now and when hopefully we get final approval.
Well, I've never had any indication from council that we're not going to proceed with this project. So, in terms of figuring out how to proceed, so that we can maximize our level of effort until we get that fall 2020 decision, is going to be the real trick. And maybe the engineers in the group may have some good ideas offline. We could have a requirements working group meeting to kind of figure out what the best path is there. But I really think getting that contracted project manager is going to be a huge catalyst for moving us forward during this wait time for the funding. In my mind, I'd love to see us already have the pavement and the parking spots all laid out so that, the building could just get plopped in place. That's not realistic, but it would be the ideal, is to just get everything done beforehand so that the construction could just commence as soon as we get that funding announced. Bill.
Thank you. I was going to, I think that is critical because the folks we have talked to, some do a complete design build. Others shake their head that is not the way to go. You get your design, you get your tender. So again, back to Ian's comments, it does seem to depend on the building and the location. So I think if the time with the project manager good and early, I think that would send us in the direction, and that would be probably based on their experience, and hopefully we got somebody that had designed or built these buildings. We have to watch that they don't belong to a company that may limit themselves from future, so I'm taking more of an outside, somebody that wouldn't be in that, but somebody with big experience, because I was baffled. You could talk to 6 of these municipalities, 3 did design build and 3 did the other side. Well, why? And they both shake their heads. They wouldn't do what the other person did. So I think we pick that person, and if we can get them early, like you say, that will be our direction going ahead.
Okay. So I'm getting, in order to do that, we need to get the council to release some funding. And, we need funding for the property, we need funding for the project manager, we need funding for the infrastructure. There's a few things that we need funding for, so that's going to be key. Sue had her hand up first, I think. Oh, JJ?
Well, I would recommend to add to that list of funding requirements that there be some, at least plant the seed that we would add a cost consultant to that as well, because, a cost consultant and project manager, between the two of them, would be able to give us a lot of guidance on design build or, design bid build. It's, design build can get you to the goal line faster in a lot of cases, but it can also cost you a lot more too, depending on the approach that design builder is taking. So anyways, I would add that to the list of recommendations, cost consultant.
Okay. Can you just send everybody kind of a description of what a cost consultant is going to bring to the table
And it need not cost a lot of money. It's just that they have a very good handle on construction costs across the country. And so they would be able to help staff and everybody else really pinpoint that dollar amount.
Okay. Brian, did you have a comment first?
I think at this point, we've heard both from Ian and Bill now that getting a project manager in place sooner rather than later is important. So are we going to be, these minutes will be going to a council meeting before the next RFAB meeting? All right, I'd like to move that we recommend to council to hire a project manager for this position, or hire a project manager.
Before we go on to that, do we need to figure out a number of hours? Like hire could be full-time or it could be
I think that'd be
part-time,
left
or-
up to council at that point, but they could, we'd be able to discuss that and figure that part out. I have a feeling like it will be put to the budget anyway, moved to October during the budgeting process to have that in place on the budget, but I think it's important to just have this in front of council sooner rather than later.
If you don't need the detail, do I have a seconder for that? Any more discussion since I was out of order discussing that earlier? No? All in favor? Well, that's one we don't need the supernumerary meeting for. Good. Do we want to have a motion on a cost consultant at the same time? Or do we want to think that through? Sue?
It would be good to have staff investigate, for sure, and to come back with information on that.
On getting a cost consultant and the benefits of? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. Bill, can you take that as an action item?
I sure can. I'll involve obviously our public work folks on that.
Okay.
And, yep. that's not a
Do you
problem.
yeah, ask them if they know or have used somebody in the past for this kind of stuff. I know we've never built something like this, but large construction. Ian?
The option on that, you may want to consider, you're going to hire a project manager, cost consultant could come as a team under that project manager. I think the project manager would have a pretty good idea of who, they got to work together, I mean, throughout this project. So maybe it's something that's considered. I don't think that would take a lot of time once you get a project manager on board.
Okay.
But it's an option.
Okay, well, we'll leave it, we'll leave it for staff to take a look at that and report back, maybe. Amy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question through you to staff would be where and when potentially are you reporting back, just again for efficiencies? Do we want that information to come directly to council? Do we want it to come to RFAB to make a further decision? If we're going to go out to tender for project manager, but then waiting in lieu for the next RFAB meeting to decide whether,
No, I think,
cost consult. I just wonder what's most efficient here. Do we want to?
Through the chair, I think my thought on the number of, a couple of action items I have here, and especially in this one, I think we can make pretty quick work of this as staff and bring back an opinion. And I'm a little lost. This group was going to meet again on September 12th?
Before
Before.
September 12th.
So
yeah.
I think I will bring back any information required for the September 6th meeting, if that helps. And then if it's some of it, hopefully we've got all the details you want. If not, then you can mill it around and see where you want to go with it. Make your decision before it goes to council.
No, I think that would be great. And then this group can decide if that's a recommendation to council or not, and we haven't lost any time. It's still for this group to decide. Thank you.
Okay. Before we dump the cost consultant concept, is there any benefit to having that consultant talk about the disposal of our current assets? Somebody in that field, will they have the better knowledge, or is it something best left internal to the county? Yeah, we're all looking at you. Yeah. JJ?
I think it'd be interesting if staff is going to, research cost consultants and, put that question to them. What experience do they have in marketing used facilities? and, getting the biggest bang for the buck in repurposing them in any way, shape, or form.
Okay, so we'll get that information for, we'll tentatively just call it the September 6th meeting and see what falls out here. Well, so the cost consultant and the application questions, those are the two things that I have first and foremost that we got to get to council ASAP. Does anybody have anything else that we need to press hard to get to council? JJ?
I think at this point, just based on experience with different projects in the past, I think it's be a good thing for staff, for council to ensure that they've got all the proper insurances in place. Because a project like this, you need errors and omissions insurance, and you need to get some of that in place before you even start the design process. So, just for the sake of covering the county in terms of liability, just to somebody to ask the insurance agent for the county, are we covered, or do they need to apply a special rider for a project like this?
Through the chair, I think that'll be an easy task. We have, our wastewater facilities we're constantly rebuilding. Maybe not a project as large as this, but $20 million jobs, and Ms. Darlington is in charge of that, and I work very well with her, so I think it's a pretty easy thing to assure we're good on.
Okay, that's good to know. So we don't have any action on this this board on that then at this point. But sounds to me like staff has all the insurances in hand for the design process and all that other stuff. JJ, did you want to review that just to make sure there's nothing glaringly omitted? Do you want to have them bring their insurance plan to us for a quick review, just to make sure that all of your concerns are met?
Sure, it wouldn't hurt to see, something, even if it's, just a condensed version of coverage, and then we can do some research and as I say, there's at least 4 different types of insurance that you need on a project of this type, so I'll just go back into some past project work and make sure that all aspects of insurance are covered the way they should be.
Motion or action, I'm not sure, but Bill, can you bring
Yeah, I think it's just an action. What I'm thinking, because we don't have a lot of this flushed out where we're close. I know JJ's local. I'll set a meeting up with yourself, myself, and Ms. Darlington's group, and we can sit over coffee one day, and half an hour will go a long ways on it.
Okay, good. All right, so the cost consultant and the application questions on September 6th. Anything else? Well, that was a fast meeting. I'm going to suggest that before we adjourn for the September 6th meeting, maybe we can take a preliminary review of those questions. It was only a couple of pages. Maybe we can answer most of them now. Amy, you've seen it. I haven't. Is that feasible or not?
To be honest, the application itself, I haven't made my way through. I'm just reviewed the guidelines only.
Okay.
And that would be way over my head, so I don't know how much I'd bring to the table.
All right. Well, let's take 2 minutes here, check your calendars, and make sure that we'll propose September 6th here and see if anybody says they can't make it. Yeah, I was aiming for, yeah, Friday, 3:30. Great. Yeah, yeah. I'm in Atlanta right until Friday morning. I'm flying back, but I should be back by 3:30 in the afternoon, so. Are you? Okay. So there's 1.5 votes no, but I'm a half vote yes, too. We'll see. Say what? What do you got? I'm in New Hampshire that day. Go around the table, maybe. Amy, go ahead.
Sorry, are you away Friday morning? Did you say that?
It depends on the weather. I gotta fly myself down to Atlanta.
I think typically we, okay, scratch that.
I'm trying to make it back on the 5th, but I might only make it halfway. We'll aim for the 6th here. Gord, can you make the 6th? Okay. Amy, can you make the 6th? Okay. So there's 2. Chris? 3. JJ? 4.5. Ryan? 5. Okay. Okay, we got quorum. So that's good. We're 6.5 for the 6th at this time. So that's good. We'll aim for a supernumerary meeting, 3:30 on the 6th here. Time now. Yeah. Can anybody do it at, say, 1300? That's 1 o'clock, sorry. 14? 1400? 14? Gord? 14? Sue still can't make it? Okay. So let's try for 1400. That's 2 p.m. for all you non-military folks. Friday, the 6th. And that's to answer the question on the cost consultant and the application questions. That is it for that. Our next regular meeting would be Monday, October 7th. However, council booked a public hearings meeting due to Fair Day on Tuesday, October 8th. So we've been suggested to have our next regular meeting a week early again, Monday, September. We've had more meetings a week early than we've had on time here. But that's okay. Monday, September 30th at 3:30. Does that work for everybody? Ian, shaking his head. 2:30 on the 30th? Or, oh, you're on the 6th again. 2:30. Okay. All in favor of 2:30 now? All right. All right. 2:30 p.m., 14:30 local for the 6th. Can you amend that, please, and thank you? Yeah. Okay, we're back to the next meeting for the regular meetings, Monday, September 30th at 3:30. Is that looking good for everybody at this point? Thumbs, good. Lots of head shakes and thumbs. Okay, that's our next planned regular meeting then after the supernumerary. That's on the 6th. Can I have a mover and a seconder to adjourn today's meeting? Sue and Ian. All in favor? Gord, you want to stick around? All right. It's carried. Ian. All right, we'll see you guys in a couple of weeks on the September 6th. So, if there's any questions that council is debating, hopefully they know that they can